evil and the ugliness of people's hearts these days is everywhere.
This is Franky Rose's Think Tank. Here's your host, Franky Rose.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I've got a bit of an echo here. Mute me out. So I was out in the middle of absolutely nowhere, and news started happening. Good God. So I have got Kennedy. He is giving a press conference. So I'm going to go there. We're a couple minutes behind, but that's about it. Okay. What do you guys think? Holy shite. Oh, okay, let's see here.
Nick, you heard the direct. You heard them say that. All right, check. Like, all right. Okay.
Not a squeaky toy. That's a chinchilla chit-chatting. Oh, Lordy. Okay, so that was just a sound check. Come on. What's going on here? Okay, there we are. Can you guys hear everything?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. I want to begin by commending President Biden for a career in public service, a long career in representing and serving our country, and for his handling of the many difficulties and challenges, personal challenges and tragedies.
Is that any better?
Suffered during his life with so much admirable conduct and the empathy that he derived from those experiences.
Thank you.
He was always proficient at showing to the rest of us. I want to add that a little over a year ago, when I entered this race, I predicted that President Biden suffered from a degenerative condition that was not going to improve, and that it would make it impossible for him to govern effectively. The reaction of the DNC to that obvious condition was to hide it from the American public and to use their power over the Democratic Party nomination process to make sure that nobody could compete with President Biden in a way that would expose his deficiencies. And as a result, we are where we are today, which is in a period of crisis. And we have two crises, and they both derive from the same condition. And that condition is the emergence of the domination of corporate power over American democracy that accelerated beginning in 2010 with the Citizens United case that unleashed a tsunami of corporate money into the American political process. And both parties are now captured by that corporate money. And they've lost any kind of authentic connection to the American people or to the populist goals of the Republic and of democracy. On the Republican side, President Biden promised the last time around that he was going to drain the swamp. But instead, he came in and he appointed a pharmaceutical lobbyists and CEO to run HHS, Verizon lobbyists to run the FCC, a Goldman Sachs CEO to run the Treasury Department, an oil lobbyist to run the Interior Department, a coal lobbyist to run the Environmental Protection Agency, and so on. And only today, President Trump has announced that in his new administration, should he win this election, that Jamie Dimon will be his choice as Commerce Secretary, and that Larry Fink, the director of BlackRock, will run the Treasury Department. This is the swamp. These are swamp creatures. And his pick as vice president is a salute to the CIA and to the intelligence community and to the military-industrial complex. And their gravy train is going to continue. And President Trump has a connection to the American people, a populist connection, but in many ways, it's the same fraudulent connection that we saw with the DNC over the past year, concealing the real purpose of their objectives, which was to give us a president that represents corporate interests rather than the interests of the American public. We've seen two presidents who aren't really addressing any of the issues that are critical to our country. We have, if you look at President Biden and President Trump, you can find on his webpage has no policy issues addressing this or any other policy. He has a picture of himself and saying that we're going to finish the job. But he doesn't tell what job he's going to finish. If it's the job of running up the deficit till it's completely unsustainable, that's something the American people should know about. President Biden can't talk about it, and President Trump can't talk about it because they're the ones chiefly responsible for running up that debt. President Trump came into office saying he was going to run the presidency as a business. He was going to balance the federal budget. And instead, he ran up an $8 trillion debt, more than all the presidents combined since George Washington. And President Biden is now on track to beat that number. So neither of them are even going to talk about this most existential issue. Another existential issue is our addiction to foreign wars. Both men have said that they're against war, and both men are feeding the war machine. The Ukraine war is a war that should have never been fought. It should have been settled. President Putin has offered twice to settle that war on terms that were enormously beneficial to the Ukrainian people and to the American people and to our security in Europe. And yet, President Putin initialed an agreement. President Zelensky initialed that same agreement in April of 2022. And President Biden sent Boris Johnson over to force Zelensky to tear up that agreement. And since then, it's probable that over 500,000 Ukrainian kids have died unnecessarily in a war that is enriching BlackRock, because they own all of the military contractors that are supplying that war. And BlackRock not only has the contract to destroy Ukraine, but it also now has the contract which President Biden gave them to rebuild Ukraine. Neither of these presidents is going to deal with the chronic disease epidemic. When my uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Today, 60% do. Diabetes alone, when I was a kid, the typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes in his career, or a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 children who walk through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And nobody's talking about why this is happening. The cost of dealing with mitochondrial disorders in our children dysfunction, which is diabetes, is now greater than our military budget. The biggest cost to our nation is the cost of treating chronic disease, $4.3 trillion annually. It's 5 times the price of our military budget. And nobody's talking about why did autism go from 1 in 10,000 in my generation and 70-year-old men today, right now, and yet my children's generation is 1 in every 34 kids, 1 in every 22 boys. Shouldn't we be looking into this? Shouldn't we be doing the science to figure out what's causing it? We know that it's an environmental explosion or an accumulation of environmental exposures. Genes don't cause epidemics. There has to be an environmental toxin. And all the corrupt merger of state and corporate power has been overseen by both political parties. It's something neither of them toxic division that is destroying our
Okay, I'm
country.
having some problems
And
here,
President
guys.
Biden's the attempted assassination
I'm starting to
of
wonder.
President Trump this week is a symptom of that toxicity. We're now more polarized in this country than at any time since the American Civil War. And
It's
nobody
not
can
letting me
see
share.
an ending to this. If President Biden gets elected, it's going to become more toxic. If President Trump gets elected,
I'll be
it's
back,
going to
guys.
become more polarized.
Okay, I'm going to go back here. And let's see here. Jeez. Look, am I big much? Good God. Present. Share.
Conduct and the empathy that he derived from those experiences, that he was always proficient at showing to the rest of us. I want to add that a year ago, a little over a year ago, when I entered this race, I predicted that President Biden suffered from a degenerative condition that was not going to improve and that it would make it impossible for him to govern effectively. The reaction of the DNC to that obvious condition was to hide it from the American public and to use their power over the Democratic Party nomination process to make sure that nobody could compete with President Biden in a way that would expose his deficiencies. And as a result, we are where we are today, which is in a period of crisis. And we have two crises, and they both derive from the same condition. And that condition is the emergence of the domination of corporate power over American democracy that accelerated beginning in 2010 with the Citizens United case that unleashed a tsunami of corporate money into the American political process. And both parties are now captured by that corporate money. And they've lost any kind of authentic connection to the American people or to the populist goals of the Republic and of democracy. On the Republican side, President Biden promised the last time around that he was going to drain the swamp. But instead, he came in and he appointed a pharmaceutical lobbyist and CEO to run HHS, Verizon lobbyist to run the FCC, a Goldman Sachs CEO to run the Treasury Department, an oil lobbyist to run the Interior Department, a coal lobbyist to run the Environmental Protection Agency, and so on. And only today, President Trump has announced that in his new administration, should he win this election, that Jamie Dimon will be his choice as Commerce Secretary, and that Larry Fink, the director of BlackRock, will run the Treasury Department. This is the swamp. These are swamp creatures. And his pick as vice president is a salute to the CIA and to the intelligence community and to the military industrial complex. Their gravy train is going to continue. And President Trump has a connection to the American people, a populist connection, but in many ways, it's the same fraudulent connection that we saw with the DNC over the past year, concealing the real purpose of their objectives, which was to give us a president that represents corporate interests rather than the interests of the American public. We've seen two presidents who aren't really addressing any of the issues that are critical to our country. We have, if you look at President Biden and President Trump, you can look at them and say these are very different people. Their dispositions are different, their personalities are different, their expressed ideologies are very, very different. Their approach to politics could not be more distinct. But if you actually look at the policies over which they differ, over the landscapes in which they're staging this election, it's a very narrow Overton window of guns, of culture war issues, of abortion, of trans rights, etc. And the big existential issues that are actually facing our country are never addressed. The biggest of these, perhaps, is the national debt. This is now $34 trillion. The service on that debt alone is now greater than our military budget. Within 5 years, 50 cents out of every dollar that we collect in taxes will go to servicing that debt. Within 10 years, 100%. This is not sustainable. President Biden, President Trump offer no solutions. President Biden, on his webpage, has no policy issues addressing this or any other policy. He has a picture of himself and saying that we're going to finish the job. But he doesn't tell what job he's going to finish. If it's the job of running up the deficit till it's completely unsustainable, that's something that the American people should know about. President Biden can't talk about it, and President Trump can't talk about it because they're the ones chiefly responsible for running up that debt. President Trump came into office saying he was going to run the presidency as a business. He was going to balance the federal budget. And instead, he ran up an $8 trillion debt, more than all the presidents combined since George Washington. And President Biden is now on track to beat that number. So neither of them are even going to talk about this most existential issue. Another existential issue is our addiction to foreign wars. Both men have said that they're against war, and both men are feeding the war machine. The Ukraine war is a war that should have never been fought. It should have been settled. President Putin has offered twice to settle that war on terms that were enormously beneficial to the Ukrainian people and to the American people and to our security in Europe. And yet, President Putin initialed an agreement. President Zelensky initialed the same agreement in April of 2022. And President Biden sent Boris Johnson over to force Zelensky to tear up that agreement. And since then, it's probable that over 500,000 Ukrainian kids have died unnecessarily in a war that is enriching BlackRock because they own all of the military contractors that are supplying that war. And BlackRock not only has the contract to destroy Ukraine, but it also now has the contract which President Biden gave them to rebuild Ukraine. Neither of these presidents is going to deal with the chronic disease epidemic. When my uncle was president, 6% of Americans had chronic disease. Today, 60% do. Diabetes alone, when I was a kid, a typical pediatrician would see one case of diabetes in his career, or a 40 or 50-year career. Today, 1 out of every 3 children who walk through his office door is diabetic or pre-diabetic. And nobody's talking about why this is happening. The cost of dealing with mitochondrial disorders in our children, dysfunction, which is diabetes, is now greater than our military budget. The biggest cost to our nation is the cost of treating chronic disease, $4.3 trillion annually. It's 5 times the price of our military budget. And nobody's talking about why did autism go from 1 in 10,000 in my generation and 70-year-old men today, right now, and yet my children's generation is 1 in every 34 kids, 1 in every 22 boys. Shouldn't we be looking into this? Shouldn't we be doing the science to figure out what's causing it? We know that it's an environmental exposure or an accumulation of environmental exposures. Genes don't cause epidemics. There has to be an environmental toxin. And all the corrupt merger of state and corporate power has been overseen by both political parties. It's something neither of them, the capture of our agencies by the industries that they're supposed to regulate. Our regulatory agencies have been turned into sock puppets of the industries they're supposed to protect us against. And all of these are issues that are critical to the American people. And finally, the most existential issue of all, the toxic division that is destroying our country. And President Biden's, the attempted assassination of President Trump this week is a symptom of that toxicity. We're now more polarized in this country than at any time since the American Civil War. And nobody can see an ending to this. If President Biden gets elected, it's going to become more toxic. If President Trump gets elected, it's going to become more polarized. And neither of these men, both of them say, both of them recognize this is existential. But both of them, neither of them can do anything about it. Why? Because they feed on it. They feed it. They fuel it. And they are the products of that division. So we need a leader who can stop feeding into the vitriol, stop feeding into the anger, stop feeding into the marginalization, the polarization, and who can find those values that bring Americans together rather than focusing on these toxic issues that are intended to keep us all apart. And it's the BlackRock, the State Street, the JP Morgan who are profiting from that division. The very people that President Trump has promised to appoint to run our government who are profiting on it, because it's like the jangling of keys. They're saying, look over here, look at abortion, look at freedom of choice, look at trans rights, look at gun rights. And while we're all staring at each other's throats on those issues, on the jangling keys, they're robbing the bank over here. They're shifting the wealth upward to this new oligarchy of billionaires. And both President Trump and President Biden engineered the lockdowns in 500 days. They created 500 new billionaires, and they shifted $4.3 trillion northward from the American middle class to this new aristocracy that we have. And it's destroying our country. We need a change. If people want more of the same, they can vote Democrat and they can vote Republican. The only way we're going to get a change in this country is if people come together behind the one candidate who is independent, who has vowed to have a unity government to bring Republicans and Democrats and others all together in a way that finds common ground in our country. A candidate who's the only candidate who's pro-choice, who's pro-environment, who's pro-civil rights, and who beats Donald Trump by 14%. There is no other candidate who can beat Donald Trump. Look at all the polls that have been done over the last year. I beat Donald Trump and nobody else can. Thank you very much.
The bottom half of your tweet talked about the nomination process at the time of next month. We'll talk about that moving forward on your kind of thoughts on being a neutral policy on who the Democrats finally nominate.
Well, I care about our country more than I do about my election or anything else. And I think we need political parties that are actually attached to the American people, that are serving the interests of our republic. And if the Democrats do what I suspect they're going to do, which is to anoint Kamala Harris, a vice president who is monumentally unpopular within her own party, but they're doing it because it's the easiest way to hold on to the money, and she's the. And I think if they don't open up the process, that it really is going to discredit this political party.
I don't think that's me.
All of my years. I get
Okay.
back at that point.
This seems like a good time for me to change
create
over.
the illusion
So
of
I'll be right
democracy,
back.
but
Don't
in fact, there
go
it
anywhere,
is
and I'll be back in a minute.
It's a cabal that is choosing the same way the Soviet Union did. Russia has elections.
Okay, just let me get this figured out here. Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what the hell was going on. I did do a virus scan and nothing showed up. So, okay, let's see here. I'd like to finish off where we were. 2 seconds. So what do you guys think of all this? Holy crap, I didn't see all this coming. I mean, I did, but I didn't. Okay, let's see here what we got. Let's see what we've got.
President Biden.
Okay.
Made this decision today.
Well, we now know, having heard from his brother, Frank Biden, that health was a consideration in the ultimate decision to make this call. He made it last evening after meeting with the First Lady and 4 close advisors: Anthony Bernal, who's a key advisor, longtime confidant of the First Lady; Annie Tomasini, who runs Oval Office and Western Operations. I remember her driving around the snowy fields of Iowa in 2007 in an Aerostar van. It was her, Joe Biden, and Hunter Biden driving around that state as he failed to win the presidency. She remains a close ally. Steve Ricchetti and Mike Donilon, 2 of his closest advisors. They began informing people today, and they stunned the world this afternoon.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you. And just to let everyone know and to recap what we've been following, this twist in a monumental 10 days in America, President Joe Biden announcing he will not seek re-election and instead endorsed his Vice President Kamala Harris. Our coverage will continue on CBS News 24/7 and in a special hour-long edition of the CBS Evening News. So stay with us. We will also bring you a primetime special on President Biden's decision. That's at 7 Eastern, 6 Central. This has been a CBS News special report. I'm Nora O'Donnell, along with my colleagues here in Washington.
With our breaking news coverage, and this it's an unprecedented day, not just in American politics, but in American history. President Biden announcing today at 1:46 Eastern that he is dropping his bid for the White House, saying he will not seek re-election. This, of course, comes after weeks of growing calls from members of his own party to step aside, many very concerned about his mental acuity, and all of this coming after his debate performance. It was June.
Washington is the seat of power. A national.
It was 24 days ago, and within the party, it was viewed as disastrous. Biden and his team, however, remained defiant that the president would not leave his race in it to win it. But calls echoed from Capitol Hill to the donor class in Hollywood for Biden to pass that torch to someone else, believing it's the best chance to keep Trump out of the White House and also maintain control of the Senate. So it seemed that Biden's confidence started to crumble, especially after he was diagnosed with COVID. That was on Wednesday while he was on the campaign trail. Since then, he's been at his home in Delaware recovering, and then this afternoon making the announcement. He took to X, posted this: "My fellow Democrats, I've decided not to accept the nomination and to focus all my energies on my duties as president for the remainder of my term. My very first decision as the party nominee in 2020 was to pick Kamala Harris as my vice president, and it's been the best decision that I've made. Today, I want to offer my full support and endorsement for Kamala to be our nominee of the party this year. Democrats, it's time to come together and beat Donald Trump. Let's do this." Well, then, Vice President Harris herself releasing a statement, writing in part, "I am honored to have the president's endorsement, and my intention is to earn and win this nomination. Over the past year, I have traveled across the country talking with Americans about the clear choice in this momentous election, and that is what I will do to continue in the weeks ahead. I will do everything in my power to unite the Democratic Party and unite our nation to defeat Donald Trump and his extreme Project 2025 agenda." ABC News White House correspondent Mary Bruce has the latest for us.
Facing unsustainable pressure from his own party, President Joe Biden deciding to exit the race, announcing he will not seek a second term. Calls for him to step aside have been growing since his disastrous debate performance in late June. From the start, the president speaking with a raspy voice, at times stumbling and trailing off, unable to finish his thought.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Even on the issues at the heart of his campaign, like abortion rights.
I supported Roe v. Wade, which had 3 trimesters. First time is between the woman and the doctor. Second time is between the doctor and an extreme situation. The third time is between the doctor, between the woman and the state.
The performance sparking panic within the party, raising questions about whether the 81-year-old had the stamina to beat Donald Trump and govern for another 4 years.
There was a big problem with Joe Biden's debate performance.
But the president and his team adamant this was just a one-off. In an interview with George Stephanopoulos a week later, Biden defending his performance.
You and your team have said you had a bad night. But your friend Nancy Pelosi actually framed the question that I think is on the minds of millions of Americans. Was this a bad episode or the sign of a more serious condition?
It was a bad episode. No indication of any serious condition. I was exhausted. I didn't listen to my instincts in terms of preparing, and a bad night.
Many Democrats questioning if Biden had the stamina for a second term.
I have medical doctors travel me everywhere, every president does, as you know. Medical doctors, some of the best in the world, travel me everywhere I go. I have an ongoing assessment of what I'm doing. They don't hesitate to tell me if they think there's something wrong.
I know you said you have an ongoing assessment. Have you had a full neurological and cognitive evaluation?
I get a full neurological test every day with me. And I've had a full physical. I had, I've been able to read for my physicals. Yes.
I know your doctor said he consulted with a neurologist. I guess I'm asking a slightly different question. Have you had the specific cognitive tests, and have you had a neurologist, a specialist, do an examination?
No one said I had to. No one said, they said I'm good.
Biden saying only divine intervention could force him out.
You sure? Yeah, sure. Look, if the Lord Almighty came out and said, Joe, get out of the race, he'll get out of the race. The Lord Almighty's not coming down.
But it wasn't enough to quell concerns. The calls from Democrats for him to step aside growing to a steady stream.
I salute President Biden. I just feel that it's time for him to step aside if we were to be able to protect what he allowed us to gain in 2020, which was a victory for democracy. But he delivered us from Trump then. He could be delivering us to Trump this year.
But the president doubling down.
You may be the nominee, no one else, not the press, not the pundits, not the insiders, not donors. You, the voters, you decided, no one else, and I'm not going anywhere.
Determined to prove his doubters wrong, Biden hitting the trail hard and facing the press.
I'm not in this for my legacy. I'm in this to complete the job I started.
But despite his best efforts, the pressure growing. Soon, top Democrats, even allies and close friends, pushing him to exit the race.
I do not think he is the best person who should go into this election. I think if he is our nominee, I think we lose.
One by one, party leaders, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, and even the powerful former Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, privately and bluntly sharing their concerns directly with the president. If he stayed at the top of the ticket, he could drag down Democrats and hurt their chances come November. The president then forced off the trail by a COVID diagnosis, reckoning with his political reality. It's the job he'd spent a lifetime working toward, more than a half a century in Washington, earning a reputation as a lawmaker with friends on both sides of the aisle, a man who led with empathy after enduring so many personal tragedies, including the loss of his first wife and their young daughter, and later his beloved son, Beau. In 2020, Biden felt an obligation to run, spurred by Trump's response to white supremacists marching through Charlottesville, Virginia.
But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are. And I cannot stand by and watch that happen.
Biden running as a transitional president.
Look, I view myself as a bridge, not as anything else. There's an entire generation of leaders you saw stand behind me. They are the future of this country.
After a hard-fought campaign, Biden beating more than 24 Democrats to become his party's nominee and quashing Trump's re-election bid.
The people of this nation have spoken. They've delivered us a clear victory, a convincing victory, a victory for we the people.
Sworn in on that inauguration day, the weight of being commander-in-chief not lost on him.
The one thing that is real, that is different, I feel comfortable with it, but is you're the last guy in the room.
Yeah.
You decide, is the decision I'm about to make, will that cause war? Will that cause conflict? The decision I'm about to make, is that going to hurt people? Is it going to help people? That's the part that is different.
On Election Day, Biden returned to his childhood home in Scranton, Pennsylvania, leaving a note on the wall, "From this house to the White House, with the grace of God." His first term marked by historic challenges, the global pandemic, historic inflation, and the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. But Biden also accomplishing major legislative successes, the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act. Biden achieving record low unemployment while in office, and often touting his efforts to lower prescription drug costs and tackle student debt. In 2023, announcing he would run again, Biden asked voters for more time to get the job done.
We, you and I, together, we're turning things around, and we're doing it in a big way. It's time to finish the job. Finish the job.
But those concerns about his age persisting, the inevitable march of time, a challenge he could not overcome. The senator who came to Washington at just 29 years old, now choosing to walk away after just one term, the oldest president to ever serve, making the difficult decision to pass the torch to the next generation.
And our thanks to Mary Bruce for that report. I also want to pass along to you that we're learning here at ABC News right now that two top congressional Democrats have spoken with President Joe Biden today. That's according to sources. So that includes Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. They spoke along with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. So just want to pass that along. Again, the story is developing. We will bring you up to speed with every nugget of information that we get. But in terms of...
So yeah, this is happening fast. Am I frozen up?
And for the American people, I want to bring in ABC News presidential historian Mark Updegrove. Woman to possibly run this country.
Oh no, guys, I was
Trump
frozen up. Oh, I'm having
he's
some
just 4 years younger than
problems.
President Joe Biden. He's campaigning for his second term, also as a convicted felon. He just survived an assassination attempt, and he is running with a man who is relatively unknown to a lot of American people, J.D. Vance at 39 years old. I'm just putting all of that out there because I want your assessment here of what this is like right now for the American people trying to understand this, digest all of this, and then make the best decision for them come November.
We are caught up in the currents of history in this moment. And
I'm having some technical difficulties. I wonder if this has...
time and time again. This is not unprecedented.
I wonder if this has anything to do with that Microsoft glitch that went on, because my computer is not behaving itself at all.
In history, Kate, I think what we have seen in the last month.
Welcome, stop.
Who could have predicted the poor performance of Joe Biden at the debate, the assassination attempt on former President Trump's life, the circumstances today of Joe Biden after insisting that he would run, that he would be his party's nominee, stepping aside and yielding the torch to his vice president, Kamala Harris. This is stuff that you simply couldn't have predicted a month ago, and we are still several months away from the election. So there's still so much more to play out. And the only historical parallel that I can see in recent years goes back more than 50 years, and that is 1968, which was one of the most turbulent, earth-shaking years we've experienced in our history. We came out of that stronger. Hopefully we will come out of this moment stronger as well, Kate.
Well, and you have to imagine what's happening right now on Capitol Hill and in the halls of Washington, the conversations that are ongoing. We have heard leaks and whispers that something like this could happen. We have heard top Democrats, either publicly or privately, encourage the president to step down. But as he's weighing all of that, while he's, isolating in Rehoboth from a COVID diagnosis, are you able to just sort of take us inside American leadership as to how the wheel was turning and how we finally got to where we are here on this historic Sunday?
Well, it's worth noting, Kana, that this is a president who has had more political experience than any other president in the history of our nation. 36 years in the Senate, 8 years in the vice presidency, 3+ years in the presidency. Unbelievably experienced. And he spent almost his whole adult life toward the acquisition and exercise of power. And finally, he achieved the highest level in politics by getting the White House in 2021.
And you know what? That is the thing. That is the thing. He did get the White House. And I don't know. He just wasn't, it wasn't, hang on here. I lost it. Let me see here. Go there. I'm sorry, I'm bringing you along for this search. Where did this go? It was Trump having something to say. Let's check this out. I think this just might have been it.
Because we are all Americans, and together we will show November 5th to be the most important day in the history of America. It will be the most important day. And when we turn it, our country is going to be great again. And if we don't turn it, our country is finished. You know it, and I know it, and everybody knows it. We are one movement, one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. And together we will make America powerful again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. Thank you very much. Thank you, Michigan. Thank you very, very much. Well, thank you very much. This is like a Michigan football game over here. This is pretty good. This is pretty good. I want to thank you, JD, for the introduction. You're going to be a fantastic vice president of the United States. And you know, I chose him because he's for the worker. He's for the people that work so hard and perhaps weren't treated like they should have been, but they were treated that way 4 years ago, I can tell you that. But we're going to get it back bigger, better, stronger than ever before. Thank you very much. This is so proud.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people feel that way, Stop. I absolutely get it. Okay, let's see here. What else I can bring you?
Vladimir Putin not being able to negotiate this, day one or in an hour, and for all of those reasons, they are very concerned about it. And foreign leaders have been talking during the NATO summit and since, certainly in Europe, about trying to Trump-proof Ukraine and the funding, and they have put in certain procedures, some of them not public, to make sure that the funding would continue and other European measures would continue. The European Parliament voted, and that's a very contentious and not at all homogeneous organization. They voted to support Ukraine very vigorously in the last couple of weeks. That said, only America can provide certain weapons, the ATACMS, the Patriots. They can piece things together, and they've been collecting Patriot missiles and other kinds of air defense from other countries because we, frankly, are out of them. We just don't have enough. But they don't have the kind of weaponry that we need. And if it is President Trump, they are anticipating that there will be increased pressure on Zelensky to negotiate territory. And right now he's in a very weak negotiating position, and that Vladimir Putin, he just wants to hold out until he sees a Trump presidency, because then he believes that he could grab more territory and eventually achieve his goals of taking all of Ukraine by 2035. That said, I mean, there's a lot to happen between now and having a successful Democratic election. And the first step would be the fact of getting behind Harris, according to some people, certainly according to the president, according to the Clintons. We have yet to hear from Nancy Pelosi on that. She and Harris have not had the warmest of personal relationships. And the endorsement by Adam Schiff is a great tell that perhaps she would also be falling behind Harris, because legally it is the easiest way to have the campaign structure. She would inherit all of those people who Jen O'Malley Dillon was talking to, would keep their jobs. There would be some layering with some of the Harris staff, but you would have a campaign in place, all of those many offices, the volunteers, as well as the money that would automatically be available to her because she was on the ticket. Some of the big donors might still move their money to down ballot races, but you would have the more than $100 million that is in the bank. And there's only 3 weeks of the convention. They've got to do something. There has been a lot of talk about a mini primary, either before or at the convention, and trying to make her compete for this. I think that would be, a lot of people argue that would be messy, but there's also talk of coupling her with someone who is a centrist governor, or outgoing governor like Roy Cooper of North Carolina, or governor like Andy Beshear. Governor Whitmer from Michigan has said she absolutely does not want it. Governor Pritzker of Illinois is available, but I think that you can't have two Californians, so that wouldn't work. So the possibilities are there, but not that deep. But certainly the running mate for Kamala Harris would be very, very important.
And very closely watched right now. Thank you for that, Andrea. Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Mark Pocan from the critical swing state of Wisconsin. It's good to see you.
Spinning a wheel of death. You guys, this is just a mess. Good Lord. I'm sorry. I am having a hell of a time streaming today. I'm having problems with not so much StreamYard, but I'm wondering about that Microsoft screw up, because I've done a bunch of different things and I am literally not having problems with certain things that I would expect to have problems with. Okay, let's see here. Okay. I'm going to leave it here because we've pretty much covered everything we need to cover. I might do a stream later. I've got a little bit that I'm working on. Sorry for all of the issues, guys. Not a clue why everything's acting up. But I'm going to look into it further because, well, it's just no good. Okay, guys. So there is our update. And as troublesome as it was, I appreciate you guys hanging in there with me. And I'll see you guys soon in the next one. Bye.